Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, what day is it? It's Monday, August 26th. It's Scott's birthday, everybody. And, he's still going to come in to celebrate his birthday, of course. He'll be in to put together the summary of today's show. What a grand and fantastic way to celebrate one's birthday. That, of course, means it was mine yesterday, but I had the day off because it was Sunday. And it was also Armando's birthday because this show is crazy and everybody's birthday is on the same day. And that's the problem with this show. All right. Well, at any rate, we move on from that because we're, each about 100 plus years old, and it's getting old to hang on to the birthday thing. And there's plenty of things to catch up on. Of course, much has happened over the weekend, and I don't remember any of it. It is a week after the convention, now time for the campaigns to try to keep the momentum going. Well, one campaign doesn't have any momentum, and that's fine. But the Harris-Walz campaign comes out with tremendous momentum. Polls are happening. Greg will be watching. Many of you are waiting to hear about the post-convention polling and whether there's a bounce or whether there's any retreat from the bounce, and whether swing states are responding to the convention messaging, etc. On the other side, we have, of course, Donald Trump fairly certain that getting the endorsement of maybe yes, maybe no brainworm guy RFK Jr. is going to make a tremendous difference, and actually hyped it so hard over the weekend that a lot of people are noticing that J.D. Vance has kind of been shoved aside and that Trump actually reposted, since we don't know how I guess he calls them truths on his social media thing. But anyway, reposted a meme, and it might have been on Twitter anyway, of referring to, what's that guy's name again? Trump, right. Trump and Kennedy together as a ticket, that this is the ticket that will win the race, or that the Democrats most fear, or what have you. And J.D. Vance, I'm sure, was at home, probably on a couch, which is problematic for him, as you now know, wondering about what this really means and whether all the talk over the past couple of weeks about maybe they should get rid of J.D. Vance and kick him off the ticket and replace him in some way is going to come true. And after all, with RFK somehow on that ticket. I don't know how that's going to work out. Of course, RFK chiefly being known as an anti-vaccine guy, I think, even before he was actually running for anything. And Trump, having to campaign as an anti-vaccine guy, but every once in a while reminding people that the one thing that he did that even Democrats will acknowledge was a thing, was get the COVID-19 vaccine program underway. He didn't do very well with it. He didn't administer it himself. He didn't really do much, and there was very little choice otherwise. But he was there, and that did go forward, and many of us have been vaccinated since, and his troops have not been, and that's fantastic. Fine for them, though it has kept us, under the thumb of COVID for an extra couple of years. But hey, other than that, what else is new? Okay, so let's see. We've got that going on. We've got Greg's Rafto stories all collected. I don't think that I was trying to scan for whether or not there was anything I needed to queue up for playing, and I'm not certain whether that's the case or not. Because, I don't know, I was a little bit behind today. The coffee is still with me at the desk. Usually that should be done by now and set aside, but we'll do it like breakfast here on a Monday. There's no other way of handling it. Okay. No clips for today, says Greg, so it looks like we're in good shape for that. Let's see, what else has been... The chat this morning has been largely online, social media-wise, about upcoming debates and the debates about the debates, because, of course, everything changed when Democrats decided to go a different direction with their nominee, and really nothing changed. But, you know, Donald Trump views this as a big change, and I can understand why. It's a totally different person that he'll be facing, and perhaps a different way of preparing for a debate. And so now, of course, the question is, will the rules agreed upon by the two parties, the two campaigns, hold for the Harris campaign? Biden agreed to a certain set of rules, and that's fine. But now there's debate behind the scenes about whether or not the behind the scenes stuff about the debate is being accepted. So we can walk our way through that, but suffice to say, it really kind of sounds like Trump wants very badly. He needs the rules to be a certain way. Otherwise, I assume the debate looks like a looming disaster for him. And there's probably not many conditions under which Kamala Harris would be worried about engaging in debate. But, you know, that might just be my fandom speaking here. So Greg Dworkin is here. Let's let him round up things from the weekend and set the course for Monday. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning. You know, so as you started out the segment pointing out in a certain way, it's not my birthday.
Right.
Right?
That's
and once
true.
I turned 70, I
negative
stopped
implication.
having birthdays.
Yes. Okay. We don't often. When was the last time we announced your birthday on one of these shows? Okay. Well, that'll do. I guess that will relieve me of the burden of trying to remember when it is.
I'm always 70.
Okay. Well, you can remember for us if you want.
Jack Benny, I'm always 39.
Excellent. Okay. And if you are, well, then you're always 72.
Yeah. 72. Right. No, 70.
All right.
No, 70 also. 72.
Who's on first?
Turn left. Right.
All right.
So, the thing is, what comes with this is that yesterday I sort of remember I had a whole bunch of things I wanted to say. Of course, by this morning I can't remember any of it.
That's the 70 speaking.
Yes, exactly. So that's why I think I'll stay there, because that really works.
Okay.
So about this debate, it's a funny thing. What happened is that Trump is the one that raised an objection, or at least the idea that he might be objecting.
Yes, I think so.
Because he wrote some nonsense about, I'll read it to you, because It's always best to read Trump, because otherwise you're sanitizing him, and I don't want to do that.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So what he said was, I watched ABC fake news, that's capital letters, this morning. Both lightweight reporter Jonathan Karl, is that with a K?
Yeah.
He writes, ridiculous interview of Tom Cotton, who is fantastic. And their so-called panel of Trump haters, and I ask, why would I do the debate against Kamala Harris on that network? Will panelist Donna Brazile give the questions to the Marxist candidate like she did for Crooked Hillary? Will Kamala's best friend, who heads up ABC, do likewise? Where is little George Slopadopoulos hanging out now? Will he be involved? They've got a lot of questions to answer. Why did Harris turn down Fox, NBC, CBS, and even CNN?
Yeah, why?
Stay tuned. So the point is, he posted that, and everybody looked at it and said, he's trying to weasel out of the debate. Mm-hmm. He's scared.
That's certainly
now, the straight reporters are saying what's really happening here is a behind-the-scenes argument between the two camps.
Yeah.
Over the rules for the debate. Harris wants a live mic. Trump wants a turn the mic off when you're not speaking, because it worked out so well for him for Biden. Our friend Armando, who's always wrong, said, Harris should just say yes. Do this. She's wrong. And I say, of course, Armando's wrong. See, the whole point here is to frame this as Trump wanting to get out of the debate. I don't really care what they do. I don't care what the rules are.
I guess that's true, and I also don't care. I'm probably not going to watch the debate
because he's behind, so he has to. So, that's not really the issue. The issue is framing it so that it's clear that he's scared and he's a pain in the ass.
Well, that's certainly the best thing you could get out of the debate. You're not going to get any answers. That's for sure.
That's that. But the debate about the debate is all about Donald Trump, and not in a good way.
So that was it's interesting because I guess the stakes have changed a little bit, and
it's funny because Harris may be the one objecting. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's all about Donald Trump. He sucks.
Well, I mean, I'm fine with that story. Interesting about the mics being, I guess they were going to mute the mics when it's not your turn to speak, which was
That's
something
what they did during
did
the last debate.
Yeah. And that sounded like it made some sense going into the debate because Trump is an interrupter
but it looked artificial.
Yeah.
So I can understand why the Harris camp would say, just let him talk.
Yeah. Also, well, the Harris camp reportedly, from the things I read said, well, we're what the real hope is that they'll say something, they'll have a debate, they'll have an exchange, and it will so infuriate Trump that he'll mutter something that'll really get him in trouble or make it look like he's losing
why his campaign wants to not do that.
Yes.
Fine. Equal arguments on both sides. I don't really care. Again, the important point is Trump is afraid to simply debate. Bring it on anywhere, anytime, except if I object, which I always do because I'll find something.
Yeah. It was also reported that they were fighting over whether or not to stand or be seated, which I doubt very much is.
Well, he wants to sit on her. She said no.
Well, now that's out of the question. Okay. Well, fine. I don't think that'll make much of a difference. I think, I'm sure they have some opinions about it. Trump doesn't look good in a chair. He sits
Trump doesn't
funny.
look good, period.
Well, yeah, he's a rumpled mess. And in a chair, he rocks, he sits funny, he puts his hands between his knees in weird ways. All right. But, I doubt very much that they're fighting about that. That was
the debate.
It was
an
an
interesting debate is completely and totally unimportant. Yeah. It'll involve reporters for 3 weeks because they have nothing else to talk about. Nobody cares. I'm just saying that the person who says, bring it on anytime, anywhere, I don't really care what your rules are.
Okay.
Wins
the
debate about the debate.
Yeah, I would guess so. Okay. Well,
and
Trump
I guess
already that must be what Armando thinks he's getting at by saying, hell, I'll agree to whatever you want. Let's debate.
Because
that's what he's doing?
He said what I just said. Whoever is strong and says, I don't really care about the rules, I'll just take you on, wins. That's what he's saying. I'm saying from a political point of view, frame Trump as the one who's trying to get out of it because, his post allows you to do that. Now, both of those things can be true at the same time.
Oh. I've forgotten what both of them are.
How you frame Trump trying to get out of the debate and Harris being strong and saying, I'll take you on anywhere, anytime, I'll do it tonight. Just go ahead.
They can both be true? All right. Okay. I'm not certain. But I guess if you follow it too closely, you'll have difficulty holding them both as true. But if you just sort of watch from the outside and say, well, when was it? September 10th?
It's September 10th,
so I don't have
and
to
Trump
wait.
is trying to get out of it. That's all you need to know.
All right. That'll be my story. Let's tell that one.
And I'm sticking to it. So in the meantime, let's give you a sense of what's going on here. Okay, so we had this really super successful Democratic convention.
That was the thing we had, right?
Okay, and there was actually a news, a PR thing that the Democratic National Convention released and said on TV, the final night of the DNC, it pulled in 26.2 million viewers across 15 networks, which was less than the 25 that Trump got. The DNC outrated the RNC in all 4 nights. A total estimate of 87 million viewers over the course of the week. It's about 20, and 25, something like that.
Yeah, pretty consistent.
Streaming across DNC Harris Wallace online programs, there was another 21 million.
Okay.
And then the important part, digital contact, the convention garnered 350 million views and counting on partner-created content across the 4 days of the convention. So remember, they credentialed, this is all alliteration, they credentialed content creators, 200 of them, to cover the convention.
Whew,
classically, confidently, and creatively. So they did all of that. And something like 500 million people saw all or part of it.
It'd be amazing.
That's more people than there are in this country, right? So the point
others.
is that's how many followers these content creators have amongst them.
Yeah, okay.
And so, you don't have to argue about the number. Was it really that many? What if they only tuned in accidentally for 35 seconds? It doesn't make any difference. There's a lot of people that didn't watch on TV that still watched. There's a lot of people that may not have seen the whole thing, but caught part of it.
Yeah.
They caught the memes. They caught the viral pieces. They caught the clips. We played a lot of them last week, especially the one about Gus Waltz saying, that's my dad. It influences people in that way. So it was a very, very successful convention. Now comes the waiting period where the pundits don't have the post-convention polls yet, so they have to make something up based on their own reporting and understanding what's going on, which is why it's so silent this morning. Nobody's really talking about it because they're afraid to post something, and then the polls come back and say, you were wrong. So what they'll do is they'll wait for the polls to come back and then say, what I'm about to say has nothing to do with the polls that agree with me. It's my own insight. And then they'll tell you what's going on.
I've never seen them be afraid to be wrong before.
They all are. That's why
it's interesting because nothing seems to happen when they're wrong. I don't get it.
Well, that's a different story. Nothing does happen. That's why they're not afraid.
They're just fearful people in general. Well, I'm afraid to be wrong, so I can understand it. I just doesn't look like they're afraid to be wrong.
So, those on I've got to do 2 columns a week no matter what, the David Brooks and Ross Doudhouts of the world just post stuff. It doesn't really matter whether it's true or not.
Yes.
Peggy Noonan is like that.
Yeah.
But, we are waiting for the polls. We do want to see what's going on. In the meantime, we do have some polling information, which is sort of interesting in its own way.
Let's find out how.
Well, for example, if you're looking at national polling, the 538 aggregate has Harris ahead by 3.6 points, which is pretty good. And let me just give you the ones since the convention, I think, ended on the 21st or thereabouts. Or 23rd, 22nd, something like that.
He'll just say numbers.
So, Bullfinch Group, Harris plus 8. Redfield and Wilton, a Republican firm, Harris plus 3. Outward Intelligence, which I've never heard of, Harris plus 6. RMG Research, which is Scott Rasmussen's news shop, Harris plus 2. Activote, Harris plus 5. And only Activote had any polling at all, and they did from the 15th to the 23rd, so they did right through the Democratic convention. We still haven't seen the post-convention polls yet, is what I'm saying, particularly from reputable firms. So it'll be really interesting to see if there is a bounce, and if so, for how long. Until you know that, you are in no position whatsoever as a pundit to declare that the honeymoon is over, because you have no idea.
Yeah. The honeymoon is over.
So naturally, everybody's declaring the honeymoon is over. They did that before the convention. And then they had a really good convention and they were embarrassed. And now that they haven't even seen the polling yet, they're already declaring it.
Yeah,
you can't.
I don't know what that was supposed to be.
The honeymoon is over when the bounce, if there is one, starts to come down, if it does.
Yeah, and if it doesn't, then it's not a bounce. It's just a surge. Yeah, I don't know what made anybody think that they ought to be talking about the honeymoon being over yet. I always thought it extended through
they're pundits. They don't know what they're talking about, but they have to tell you anyway. They're contractually obligated.
I guess so. We have to say the word honeymoon in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I would have guessed that it's like, well, what is that? The week after the convention closes, and then after that, the high of the experience is over, and you get back to reality. But of course, I was thinking that this late convention must have been planned for possibly this reason. You always remind us, no one's paying attention until after Labor Day. That's now a week away.
Right.
It's not a long haul.
See. Yeah. So basically, over the next week, we'll find out what's going on here. Now, this was interesting. This is a memo released by Public Policy Polling, which I think is a pretty good, not an A+, but a pretty good polling firm, often used by Democratic firms.
Okay. There's still extra credit. They could get an A+.
And they say the thin line between big wins for Harris and Trump.
Mm-hmm. Thin line between Harris. Okay.
Okay. In other words, the polling is so close that if it just goes either way by a couple of points, it makes a huge difference. Why is that important? Because, and I'll put this in scare quotes, everybody knows, end quote, this is a close election. We, in fact, don't know that, but that's the standard line.
Yes.
Why do we know it's a close election? Because it was under Biden. And now, if the election were held today, according to the polling, which was taken pre-convention, it would be very close.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
but
I mean, I think actually
happen over the next, month and a half.
If the election were held today, based on the results of the polls you don't have yet, it might not be that close.
If the election were held today, it would not be this year's election. Because this year's election is in November. So let's just establish that.
We would think it was a primary and dismiss it.
So what they write is in the last week and a half, PPP has done over 30 polls, both statewide and in various districts in Arizona, Colorado, Delaware, Florida, Kentucky, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Montana, Nebraska, New Hampshire, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas.
Congratulations. Okay.
All states of interest.
Sure.
Except maybe Delaware.
Yeah, right. That one's very boring.
But, Senate race and all. That represents a pretty broad swath of the country.
Which ones?
I don't know. I don't even know what's in Delaware. That represents a pretty broad swath of the country, and in the polls that included the presidential race Kamala Harris is doing an average of 1 point better than Joe Biden did in the same place.
That's the least exciting thing I've ever heard.
Conventional wisdom to make sense of that, okay?
Yeah.
The conventional wisdom is that Kamala Harris needs to do a 3-point win in order to win the Electoral College. Not much of a split, but the idea is if she's absolutely tied, then Trump wins because of the advantage in the electoral vote that Republicans have. Used to be wider, but 3 is pretty close. So James Carville is on saying, well, 3 is the magic number, and it's absolutely determined and cannot be argued with.
Oh.
And my reading of the averages says that Harris is 2 points ahead. Therefore, she loses.
Oh, thanks.
He said that.
Good. I'm glad he's working for her. Okay. Great. Well, Bill Maher wants to hear the Democrats are losing.
As it turns out, as I told you, the 538 average has her 4 points ahead.
Aha.
And that's the point of public policy polls. If she is doing better than Biden did, and Biden won, even if it's by 1 point, that's good for her. What PPP is trying to tell us is that there's polling averages, there's margins of error, things can change. So a 1 point swing against her is bad, and a 1 point swing for her is very, very good. And we don't know what's going to happen. And that, my friends, is the state of the race.
Blah. No wonder no one wants to talk about it.
Right. And so, the thing is, what if the polling surge yet to come from the Democratic National Convention that we haven't seen and we don't know exists is real? Well, then the whole memo can be thrown out and you got to write a new memo.
Well, all right. I mean, these guys are in the memo writing business. They don't mind.
So they're right. That's great news for Democrats. If that held across the board, she'd win by a commanding 5-point margin in the popular vote and win the Electoral College, 303 to 235.
That would be convincing.
In 2020, 81% of Republicans voted in North Carolina and only 75% of Democrats did. That's why Harris bringing joy and getting people excited matters, even though the pundits will tell you, oh, joy doesn't matter. It's only about grumpy pants.
Joy is not a strategy. Well, no, it's not, but it's not nothing.
Well, if 81% of Republicans voted in North Carolina in 2020 and only 75% of Democrats did, joy is a strategy.
Oh, I guess. All right. I mean, I guess. I mean, I don't know. If it upsets you that it is a strategy, that's a different issue.
Right.
But
because they write in the polling memo.
I just never really regarded it as a strategy.
If the excitement around Kamala Harris evens out that 81-75 differential, it's easy to imagine a world where it narrowly flips blue too, and Harris wins 319-219, which would be considered a blowout.
Oh.
So Democrats should feel pretty good, right? Yes, but cautious.
Well, sure. That's we
Let's
always
say
feel
instead
cautious.
there was a small shift in the race, and instead she actually ran a point behind. That would flip Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin into Trump column, and he wins. So things are going great right now, but that's how thin the line is. 1.4 movement in a Democratic direction is a blowout. 1.2 movement in a Republican direction is a loss. So that's why people are sort of hedging their bets a little bit about what this all means. What I am saying is I get that, but it's based on polling today or last week's polling reported today. It doesn't necessarily reflect what's actually going on out there. And what's actually going on out there are literally hundreds of thousands of volunteer shifts on phone banks and door knocking for Harris that's going on in the swing states alone.
Yes. Okay.
All right. And so the idea that behind the campaign, and, we learned of this every 4 years. We forget it in the interim. But the idea is to get your committed people, get them to vote early, get them to vote by mail, bank those votes.
Yeah.
And the reason is then the campaigns can spend all of their resources and all of their time trying to get I don't know, I haven't decided yet. Taniel, our friend from Bolt's magazine, pulled up this, I don't even know when it was from. It must have been 15 years ago.
Huh.
A Samantha Bee piece
Yes.
that was on the Daily Show where she was interviewing uncommitted voters, which is absolutely hilarious. And she has 8 people seated, the typical CNN panel.
Right.
More on that. We have follow up on the guy who said he's voting for Trump. And anyway, she said, okay, let's sit down. And they sit down and says, how do you feel? And she asks, how do you feel? They look at each other. Then they change seats.
Okay.
And then she tries to ask something else, and they look at each other, and they change seats again. They're so undecided, they can't even decide where to sit. It is absolutely hysterical.
Weird.
And that's our uncommitted voters today, undecided voters today. Turns out, by the way, the guy who decided he was going to vote for Trump has been a committed Trump supporter all along.
Gee whiz.
He says he told CNN that before the panel. They still listed him as an uncommitted voter. And it just is reminding us of all those times where, well, a man in the street, uncommitted voter, said he's voting for Trump. And then you look him up and he's the state chair for the local.
Yes. CNN has been notorious for that, maybe because they do more of these panels than anybody else, but
maybe.
Yeah. But I could also see them. I'm thinking about like Bill Clinton and his statistic where he just couldn't believe the statistic he was going to read about unemployment. Like if they're putting together the panel and like all of you say you're going to vote for Harris, that's not going to look like we did an undecided panel. We need, all right, you say you're undecided, but do your thing.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin still with us because that's how we do this segment. We do it as one big segment.
I was rocking out on the intro music there.
Yeah, well, it gets in your head. No, not in the listeners' heads because they hear something else entirely.
Right. So again, just to give you a sense of what's going on here.
Yes.
This is a separate but similar piece from the Washington Post. Who's ahead in Harris versus Trump 24 presidential polls right now? And they have an interesting take on this. Harris is ahead in their average by 2 points, as opposed to 538, which says, 3.8 or whatever they have, closer to 4. What the Washington Post does, they say, yeah, Harris is ahead, but what if there were a polling error similar to 2020?
Oh, my God. Is this unskewing?
Yeah. If there were a polling error similar to 2020, then Trump would be ahead by 3 in most of the states.
If there was a polling error
similar to 2016, Trump would be ahead by 4 in most of the states. If there were a polling error similar to 2012, Harris would be ahead by between 2 to 5 in most of the swing states. So does that help you? No, it doesn't. No. It just says, okay, a small lead is a small lead.
Okay. I mean, if there was a polling error similar to Romania in 1989,
Yeah.
Trump would really be
exactly.
in trouble.
So this is one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is say, well, let's stop watching what they say.
Let's stop.
Let's watch what they do.
Okay.
What are they doing? Well, Walz and Harris and Walz, are going to take a bus ride across Georgia.
No one has ever done this.
Well, they really haven't, because usually Democrats go to Atlanta, park there, and that's all they do.
Oh.
So the Democrats in Georgia
Really?
are really happy about this. Democratic State Senator Derek Mallow, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who I turn to for Georgia politics, says couldn't help but cheer when he saw Vice President Kamala Harris' schedule this week. She's taking a South Georgia bus tour with her running mate Tim Walz, followed by a solo rally in Savannah. Mallow, a Savannah Democrat, is one of many party leaders who have pushed the Harris campaign to look beyond Metro Atlanta for votes in November. We need the entire state of Georgia to win, he said. This is monumental, a testament that the vice president is working for every community, not just big cities. That's in addition to Tim Walz committing to, in certain districts, by request of the people running in the district who are Democrats, he's going to do a Friday Night Lights tour and do high school football.
Well, that sounds pretty good. I like the way that's being used. Usually when there's tours across Georgia, they end in Savannah. It's nice to begin this one in Savannah.
Right. And so before I tell you this next story,
yeah,
I want to give you something from Rolling Stone. Fact checkers try to shield Trump from Project 2025's abortion madness.
Why? I thought they were fact checkers.
Well, basically by saying he didn't really say what you thought he said something similar to what you thought he said, but that is all the difference in the world.
What is this, some high tribunal?
Instead of fact-checking Trump's absurd claim he had nothing to do with Project 25, for example, PolitiFact slams Kamala Harris for tying him to the program.
Come on. What? All right, fine.
I mean, so you look at it and say, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. What's going on here? And, it's good that they do that. I mean, it's absolutely good that they make fun of that. So one of the odder features of American journalism, they say, is that the columnists who hold themselves out as fact checkers and review claims made by politicians, calling balls, strikes, and Pinocchios, are unusually terrible at it. They offered up several botched reviews of content from the DNC, but nothing has broken their brains like Democrats' sustained attacks on Trump over Republicans' anti-abortion agenda, which is laid out in gory detail in the Project 2025 policy roadmap.
Yes.
Now, Trump has actively attempted to run away from it because it's deeply unpopular. He claims, I know nothing about it, and it's an absurd claim. The policy manual was written in large part by former top Trump administration officials. And when he spoke at a 2022 event hosted by the Heritage Foundation, the think tank beyond Project 2025, Trump said, this is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detailed plans for exactly what our movement will do.
Yeah.
And also, Trump was directly briefed by confidants and close aides. The people working at 2025 said, ignore what he says. He's totally behind us. So instead of fact-checking Trump's clearly false claims that he knows nothing about it, fact-checkers have decided they and everyone else must simply take him at his word.
Yeah, that's probably not great for people in the fact-checking business.
Not if you know anything about Donald Trump. Further, Democrats must be punished for tying Trump to its unpopular policy proposals. For example,
when did punishment come into
PolitiFact,
this?
which actually is part of the Poynter Institute, it declared it was unfair of the DNC to broadcast a video of Trump in 2016 saying there's been some form of punishment for people who have abortions because he walked back the comment.
I think no.
Right? On Thursday, PolitiFact staff reviewed Vice President Kamala Harris's claim that Trump plans to create a national anti-abortion coordinator and force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions. And they said it's mostly false because Project 2025 isn't Trump's plan, and Trump and his campaign have repeatedly said they're not involved in the project, and Trump isn't listed as an author.
What would be the point of listing him as an author anyway? But all right.
Wait, it gets worse. Project 2025 doesn't mention a national anti-abortion coordinator. The document calls for a pro-life, politically appointed senior coordinator of the Office of Women, Children, and Families.
Oh, I see. Totally different.
Totally different. Okay?
I mean...
It's terrible. It's awful. But that's the context for this. So the Free Beacon, tell me about what you know about the Free Beacon.
Mostly fake, worse than the Washington Examiner.
Thank you. So the Free Beacon posts something that Tim Walz boasted.
All right, so that's wrong.
That in 1993, he was named the Outstanding Young Nebraskan by the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce for his service in the education, military, and small business communities. Alex Thompson of Axios retweets this and said, but he wasn't.
1993, Nebraska.
He was named the Outstanding Young Nebraskan by the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, but he wasn't.
Well, okay.
You know why?
Was he Nebraskan? But okay.
No, he received the award from the Nebraska Junior Chamber of Commerce, and the website got it wrong, and they corrected it and said, sorry, that was our mistake. That's all there is to the story. And Alex Thompson retweets this as if this is a big gotcha. Remember what I said about the fact checkers?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean,
so that's why I wanted to tell you a story. And this will give you part of the question is how old are you?
Yes.
Are you old enough to remember Chuck Norris?
Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're moving on to that one. All right. Yeah, I do remember. Of course, sure. And he's still alive. But he's not, doing karate movies at the moment, right?
No, but he's a big tough guy.
Yeah, sure.
That's really the thing you need to know.
Exactly.
So back in the day
Well,
when the internet was young, there were Chuck Norris internet memes. Right?
Yes.
Like Chuck Norris is so tough that when Chuck Norris was born, he drove his mother home from the hospital. Chuck Norris is so tough that when the boogeyman goes to sleep at night, he checks the closet for Chuck Norris. Right? When Chuck Norris cuts onions, the onions cry, that sort of thing. Now, whether you find those amusing or not, that's not the point. The point is they were ubiquitous. They were more ubiquitous than a Rick Astley Rickroll in his day.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, sure.
So if they seem vaguely familiar, think Tim Walz. Right? And we've all seen them. Tim Walz is such a Midwest. We talked about him on the show before this so-called gotcha scoop broke. Tim Walz is such a Midwestern dad that he checks my tire treads before I leave the driveway. I don't even know him. Right? Tim Walz could teach me to drive stick shift without making me cry. Tim Walz is who J.D. Vance wants you to think J.D. Vance is. That's the point. Yeah. These things are ubiquitous. So when this stuff came out, people just started making fun of Alex Thompson and the Free Beacon. And they had responses like, exclusive photographs, Tim Walz wearing a crown that proclaims him Burger King despite having no such title.
Yeah.
I heard he ordered a 6-piece nugget order, but it was actually a 10-piece. He said he was leaving right away, and he stayed to talk to me for another 35 minutes. I mean, he's obviously a liar. See, the point of all of this, they're ubiquitous as Chuck Norris memes. And what that means is that Tim Walz has already defined himself as Coach Walz, and none of this stuff is working. That's what this is telling us. And I just think it's fascinating when you try to look at this. They are trying to push garbage because they have nothing. And it's not working.
I guess the garbage has gotten worse.
Because Tim Walz memes. That's how you know it's not working.
Yeah. And I mean, it's good defense against this stuff that seems so artificial anyway. But I was just sort of still focusing on they were trying hard to land something that was going to be real and substantive, like attacking his service record somehow. But it was absurd to try to do that in the face of 24 years of this service.
Right, but remember the original
this is even
one. That
worse.
was only the second time. The first time they tried to do it based on his response to the George Floyd problems in Milwaukee. And that didn't work because Trump had a phone call that was recorded congratulating Tim Walz on how well he did.
Always record your calls with him.
So that quickly got memory hold, and now you don't even remember that they did that, but they did that.
Yeah.
And everything they've done hasn't worked. And this is like, that at least was a little more substantive. The military stuff, in theory, could have been substantive. They've got nothing.
Yeah,
they weren't ready, they weren't prepared, and the stuff they're coming up with is like, cringeworthy for an intern.
So the Chamber of Commerce one, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the reporter who did it, but well, generally speaking, I do know the Free Beacon, and so I guess if it had been any other mainstream reporter, they could have come back and said, I don't know, he said this thing, and I went to the website and I checked, and it wasn't true, and now I found out that he forgot the word junior, and so it's fine. But not
even better,
him. He's going to double down.
Free Beacon, I read what happened. I'm not even talking about this. This is stupid.
That would be the better way of treating it. But had it been reported by CBS News, I imagine they would have said, I don't know, we checked the source and the source said no, but now we see why the source said no, and there's nothing here.
But you can see what they're trying to do. See, if they had a year, then they could do it the way they did Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's foundation was accused by the Free Beacon of something. And then 3 months later, we looked into it and it's not true. But we've been talking about it for 3 months. Now let's pick some other issue.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton's foundation
is trying
did something
mightily.
Completely different that also is not true, but we'll talk about that for another 3 months. We haven't even gotten to her emails. That was a gift. But, that's what they do.
Yes.
And they just don't have time to do it. They don't have
that is true too.
But they also don't have time to do it.
And Comer has tried mightily to do this sort of thing, announcing that there would be investigations into all of the things they tried to pin on Walz, but then because it's August and they're not in session, before he could even, get on TV to talk about convening these things, besides just putting out a press release saying he would, by the time he could get on TV to talk about them, the memes were dead. It wasn't working, and there'll never be an investigation because, they're going to come back in September and be focused on, keeping the government open. There's not going to be any time for that. And were they to launch an investigation, everyone would say, oh, wasn't that debunked like a month ago? This is boring. Get me something new. They do very much hope to be able to run the Benghazi play against. They can't do it against Harris for some reason. There's just nothing that they can latch onto. The idea of doing it against a vice presidential candidate at all is probably a bad one. Doing it against a vice presidential candidate like the cuddly Tim Walz.
Coach Walz? You can't do it against Coach Walz.
Not likely to be able to work. So, all right. I mean, I guess I'm happy that they continue to focus on trying to do that to him instead of Kamala Harris. Seems like a gift.
Yeah, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and think it's going to have a different outcome. It's not going to have a different outcome. You can't do that against Coach Walz. So there's that.
All right.
So Trump still has to have some way of disrupting the narrative. He's got this debate about the debate he's trying.
Sure.
And he's got RFK Jr. Now, I don't know what to say about RFK Jr. other than that he's a complete nutcase.
Right.
But the idea that let's embrace RFK Jr. and treat him as if he's the real vice presidential candidate while making J.D. Vance sit on a couch somewhere is inherently a mistake.
Okay.
You tell me why.
Well, one, no one cares about RFK Jr. To the extent that he was taking votes from anybody, by the way, it was from Trump himself. So I guess he's probably happy with himself bringing him into his camp. But I mean, it's just not a coup of any sorts. There aren't Democrats who thought it would be a good idea to vote for RFK Jr. So I don't know. And I don't care about J.D. Vance, but, I don't know. Maybe he's got enough of an ego that he'll get upset about it. And I don't know what he'll do about it. He can't light the whole thing on fire from his seat, but okay. I mean, bringing in another weirdo also doesn't help you duck the weird label. So I can't think of any real reason why this should work even marginally for these guys. I'm stuck. If you have one, let me know.
Right. So, there's that. There's this really interesting piece in the New Republic by Michael Tomasky today. Finally, the Democrats have found Trump's Achilles heel: ridicule him.
Well, geez.
Kamala Harris gets it. Yes, we should fear Trump, but we should also mock him mercilessly because it drives him nuts. That's all true, and we should. And so one of the things that people were making fun of is, yes, J.D. Vance.
All right.
You may recall, we probably talked about it. I'm old. I don't remember anymore. So many things happened. That J.D. Vance went into a donut shop.
I heard something about this.
And he tried to order donuts.
Like, how is, all right.
Okay, and it was pretty clear that his advanced staff either is incompetent or hates his guts.
Or?
Because they didn't go into the shop beforehand and say, hey, J.D. Vance is coming. He's Donald Trump's VP candidate.
Maybe you've heard
who
of
would
him.
like to talk to him about the order. They didn't do any of that stuff. They just walked into the donut shop with a camera crew, and the first thing somebody behind the counter said was, I don't want to be filmed.
Okay. That's.
Okay, he said, okay, fine.
Yeah.
How long you been working here? About 2 years. Yeah, good. I'd like to order donuts. Okay, what would you like? Well, whatever makes sense, he says. And he had further dialogue,
that's
which
a problem.
made it sound like he's never actually spoken to a human being, which has been parodied. There's a great parody about, maybe that's a clip I should have sent you, of a guy walking in the park, running up to people or walking up to people and trying to introduce himself. One of them was really funny, especially funny. A human over there. Let me go talk to her. Hello, human. I'm J.D. Vance.
Yes.
Are you here in the park? Yes, I'm here with my daughter. Oh, well, how long have you been here? A while. Okay, very good. And the mother says to the girl, go run to the car, quick. and it's just, J.D.
There's
Vance.
plenty.
And then the corresponding piece is Tim Walz in Nebraska going into a Runza shop. You may not be familiar with Runza. I certainly wasn't. I'm not from the Midwest. But it's basically a meat pocket. Okay, and they're sold in Runza stores, which are just Midwest only. They've never gone national chain. And, he meets with people. How long you been here? Oh, yeah. Tim
How long
Walz,
you been here?
I went to high school at the same place you did. Are you from? Yeah, I live right up the road. Your mother knows my grandfather. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it was just, warm and cuddly and Coach Walz and sort of stuff. And the contrast between the two was just, shall we say, outstanding.
Yeah. That is weird. By the way, how do you spell Runza?
Runza.
Is that okay? I'm just
sometimes
Runsa.
It's actually
Really?
from German.
Oh,
but it's a meat pocket, and
I'm gonna get some.
It's a thing.
Okay.
It's a thing just as much as cheese.
Empanada.
They
Runza.
they're there now. Another thing I want to talk about is never Trumpers, just a little bit, because I think this gives you a good flavor of what's going on. We reported on this.
Yes.
And for
yet, we don't know what it is.
For some reason, my browser is insisting on giving me audio on this, and I don't want to, so let me turn that off. So David French, as you know, wound up making the pro-life case for Kamala Harris and endorsed her.
All right. I mean, okay.
She's conservative. He said, I'm very conservative and pro-life, but at least, I can get over that. She's at least a firm person of conviction. I get all of that. For the first time in his life, he says he plans to vote for a Democratic presidential candidate, Kamala Harris. He says he'll vote against Donald Trump precisely because he's a conservative, because Trump represents everything he hates. Okay, fine.
Yeah, I mean, good.
So pundit Jonah Goldberg took some exception to this. But the thing to step back and realize for us who are not these people and don't work in these circles and live in these bubbles is that Jonah Goldberg is also going to vote for Kamala Harris. The difference between the never Trumpers like Sarah Longwell, or Tom Nichols, is that they're not only voting for Harris, they're endorsing Harris, and if you asked them to, they would have spoken at the DNC for Harris.
All right.
People like Stephen Hayes and Jonah Goldberg will vote for Harris, but they have to pout about it. They have to say, it wounds me to my conservative soul to have to vote for Harris. I mean, I have to. Trump is awful. I can't vote for him. I am a never Trumper. But don't for a minute pretend Harris is any good.
Okay.
I can't find anything good to say about her. I'm not endorsing her.
Yeah.
I'm just voting for her. And stop asking me to endorse her. I don't see why I should. And so that is the never Trumper fight that they're having. So Tom Nichols looked at this whole discussion and said, look, I'd like to think Stephen Hayes and Jonah Dispatch and Sarah Longwell and I all come from the same church, but different pews. I admit, I'm over on Sarah's side of the aisle about what it means to be never Trump. It means not only criticizing him, but stopping him. I get Steve and Jonah's frustration that some conservatives seem born-again liberals. I don't think that's me, but until Trump is gone, many never-Trumpers think policy differences don't matter, and that drives other conservatives nuts. I get that. Okay, but conservatives who oppose Trump should be able to say Harris is better than Trump without a lot of tears. If her speech last week is an indication, conservatives will get things they like, things they don't. So they're making a reasonable choice. But especially against Trump, this shouldn't really be an argument among never-Trumpers. And I'm not sure why making a positive case for Harris has to be regarded as some kind of ideological betrayal. And Reed Galen, who's a former GOP consultant, strategist, whatever you want to call him.
Okay.
Says, look, your issue, speaking to Jonah Goldberg, is that you still see this as some kind of normal binary choice. It's not. It hasn't been. And if you told me 10 years ago, I'd be doing all I could to elect Kamala Harris, I'd say you were smoking something. She's normal. She's patriotic. And that's enough.
Yeah. I mean, against this guy, it certainly is. Sure.
Right. So that's the entire argument that they're having. And it's sort of interesting because policy does matter to some of these folks, just like it does to us. But the question on the table is, what do you do about it when you're faced with a binary choice? For the Democrats, you go back to the DNC and look and see what we did. We said it's okay for Kamala Harris to get up there and make a speech about the military saying that I like it when they're lethal. Well, that bothered people.
Militaries are.
But we stepped back and said, well, that's what militaries are for. And you know what? She's got to win.
Yeah. And
Adam Kinzinger, who is a Republican still, spoke in prime time on the most important day of the convention. And other voices didn't get there, including pro-Palestinian voices. Right. And we shrugged our shoulders and said, you got to win. You got to do what you need to do to win. So we are taking the same approach as some of the never-Trumpers are. This is not necessarily our beloved policies, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah,
And Tim Miller took the other approach of looking at what some of the people who haven't done that are doing on the other side.
What are you doing?
Bad it is.
Oh.
So he's got a piece called They Served with Trump and Saw the Crazy. They should endorse Harris. He's talking about McMaster and, some of the chiefs of staff and military people.
Mitch McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao, should.
Yeah. So, all of those things, he said, look, once the strategic, logistical, and ideological concerns are resolved, there's only one thing left to explain the lack of anti-Trump Republican support for Kamala, and these people are chicken shit. That's why. So let's just peruse a small sample of what a few of these MIA officials have said.
All right.
With an assist from Al Franken, who's playing librarian here. John Kelly, the depths of his dishonesty is just astounding to me. He's the most flawed person I've ever met in my life. Jim Mattis, he's dangerous. He's unfit. The president has no moral compass. This degradation of the American experiment is real. Dan Coates, he doesn't know the difference between the truth and a lie. Rex Tillerson, a moron. Mitt Romney, I think he's not smart. I mean, really not smart. A whack job.
Oh.
Gary Cohen. I don't even know who Gary Cohen is.
Gary Cohen. Okay.
I mean, I could find out. I could click on it and see. But the important thing is he said Trump is dumb as shit.
Oh. Well, he's right about that.
Idiot, dope.
Why don't I know this
Trump's
guy?
aides have insulted the boss, so it comes from a Politico piece. H.R. McMaster cannot understand Putin's hold on Trump. So puzzle me this, says Tim Miller. There were two options for president. On the one hand, you have a woman who just presented herself as a mainstream Democrat who plans to respect and uphold the fundamental American political traditions at home and abroad. On the other, you have a candidate who you have acknowledged is the most flawed person you ever encountered, a danger to the country and an existential threat to our system of government, a convicted criminal, an abuser of women, and a moron. How in God's name do you justify silence in the face of that choice? This is not a close call.
No. Wow. Gary Cohen, by the way, sportscaster, play-by-play for the Mets.
Oh, great.
I mean, okay. I don't hear play-by-play for the Mets I don't know, in the last 3 decades or so since I'm down here in Washington. But okay,
I'll
take it.
So then Tim Miller
New York
points out, look, some of these people might be making calculations about their political futures. If so, it's utterly craven, but take the morality out of it. It's ridiculous. They don't have a political future.
Okay.
Let's take one example of Chris Christie.
Sure. Please, even.
Right? The only possible world in which he has a future in politics is as a token Republican in a Democratic administration or as a GOP candidate for president from New Jersey, following a thrashing of Trump so massive and undeniable it shakes the entire party to its core. And in both of those scenarios, Christie's prospects would be improved by supporting Harris this fall. So basically, he goes on to say, don't give me this nonsense about they need to. They don't need to. They need to do the opposite. They need to support Harris. So when you put the context of the cabinet that worked for Trump, along with the never-Trumpers who say they'll vote for him but won't campaign for Harris, and Tim Miller has a great point. There's really no reason for them to be doing that, because the political realities of why they won't endorse Harris really don't point them to saying that they have benefit in holding off. They're actually going to have benefit by endorsing her, especially after Trump loses. So it's just an interesting dynamic that we should see. And the bottom line here is, remember, for all of those people, you can excoriate them, you can call them cowards. They're all voting for Harris, all of them.
Okay.
None of them are voting for Trump.
Well,
and that's really the most important thing to get out of all of this whole discussion.
It is. Much more important than my getting the correct Gary Cohn, which I think I didn't. There is a Cohn Cohn who was Donald Trump's, apparently one of his top economic advisors from Goldman Sachs, maybe. And I found that by Googling the quote that you gave me, that choice quote. So probably not the Mets guy, although that would have been very surprising to do on the Mets podcast.
There's a Gary Cohen that
well.
runs the corner deli down the block from me, but he's not that guy.
Right.
Although he also said that, but that's not who's been highlighted.
Well, the first hit for Gary Cohen with an E is the Mets guy. And I'm like, honestly, could I see the Mets play-by-play guy saying that Donald Trump is dumb as shit? Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, Greg. And what can we say? We'll do more of it on Wednesday. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A few seconds late as we started our music late, but by the time this gets to podcast, this will all be fixed, and you can ignore everything I'm saying now, even though now we have it on the record, and what are we going to do with it? Okay, Gary Cohn got the wrong guy. I mean, it should have been fairly obvious, but like I said, I could absolutely see a Mets play-by-play guy saying, sure, Donald Trump is dumb. But this is Gary Cohn, different guy, as they describe him here in this old 6-year-old article from The Guardian, where they say he's an experienced Democrat who was a singular figure in Trump's White House. That's odd, all by itself. But if you're looking for an explanation, why would an experienced Democrat allow himself to serve as even a non-singular figure in Trump's White House, but particularly as a singular figure? And the answer is, sure, he was a Democrat, but he's also the former, as they say here, Goldman Sachs number 2. And I mean, everybody who's at Goldman Sachs is a number 2, quite honestly. But they mean, of course, I guess, second in command. If it was Al-Qaeda, that's the most dangerous job. I don't know how it works at Goldman Sachs, but he apparently had a global outlook, which is amazing how you even get yourself into remember that the Trump administration and Steve Bannon are there to smash the globalists or own the globalists, but here they hired a globalist, and a Democratic globalist at that. And what did he do? He had a global outlook that put him at odds with Trump, whom he reportedly held in low personal regard. That's how they put it, at least in the sub-headline here. But maybe they get more specific. I mean, I don't know if I really want to spend time reading an article from 2018 about that, but since we got it so completely wrong, I don't know. I don't know who Gary Cohn is, and I looked up Cohen. This is Cohn, again, in case you want to look it up. It does say, even for a lesser titan of finance, one without a reputation for deep self-regard, interesting, it would have qualified as a painfully humbling moment. What was it? At a news conference in January, that would be January 2018, Gary Cohn, who was the Goldman Sachs #2 for a decade, found himself called to the lectern by Donald Trump. The president had been asked by a reporter whether Cohn was happy in his job as director of the National Economic Council. Okay. Interesting question. And the directive is, "Come here, Gary." Trump said, "Are you happy?" "Yes, I'm happy," Cohn replied through a clenched smile. "How's that?" So I guess they figured out that he wasn't happy. By Tuesday, Cohn was apparently no longer happy, becoming the most recent in a parade of departures from the White House. So when was that? A news conference in January. And then by Tuesday, we're talking about Tuesday in early March. Tuesday, March 6th, 2018 is the date on this piece. So it was either last Tuesday, which I guess would have been January 31st, or, February 28th, 2018. Yeah, okay. Or this is reported the day of Tuesday, March 6th. So are you happy? Yes, I'm happy. And a week later, no, he's unhappy and he's leaving. In a year in the Trump administration, Cohn had successfully engineered a huge deliverable for some of his peers in the financial community in the form of juicy tax cuts. So that's what he was there for. Okay. But privately, Cohn harbored strong objections to the president's leadership, reportedly going so far last summer as to draft a letter of resignation after the president blamed, quote, both sides for what? Racist violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. Cohn also held a low personal estimation of the president, finding him dumb as shit. That's what it says. So this is my fourth mention of the word, or my second mention of the word. Just making notes for whether or not we really care to go in and do any censoring anymore. It's not even funny anymore after that one rant where that's what it's used for. Okay, well, let's see. This was, by the way, the quote there, according to the journalist Michael Wolff in his book, Fire and Fury, in case you want to look for the original source on that. All right, there's more, he did lots of things where he started his career, blah, 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 but now we figured out who he is. And, I guess it would be, I guess it's even worse. Like, how is there no comment from Gary Cohn? Now, if he was a Democrat who agreed to serve in the Trump administration, probably for the sole purpose of getting a tax cut for the wealthy, because he's wealthy, and then departs, like, shouldn't that be one of the easiest quotes to get, that he doesn't like Donald Trump and will be voting for Kamala Harris? Is that what we learned from that segment? I got so sidetracked by the fact that we didn't know who Gary Cohn was, and then we had the wrong Gary Cohn. Sorry. Apologies to the Mets announcer, who also probably agrees, but who may also have gotten a tax cut out of this. I think it's probably a pretty well compensated position. I don't know that it's billionaire. It's not billionaire level, but it's pretty good, I'm sure. All right. Let's see. Other stories to share with you, and there are many, some of which let's see, we already covered the debate thing, and I think fairly well at that. Let's double back onto some of the coverage that we gave last week and maybe some clarification for things. We got at least one email, possibly more than that, about the mention of, there was the guy we wanted to profile who was an advisor to, I don't know who. Remember Curtis Yarvin, the guy who's credited as an advisor to J.D. Vance in his weirdness. And we mentioned in the few paragraphs we were able to read in the introduction of this piece that the guy considered himself and his followers to be, remember the weird mention of dark elves, and say, that's a weird guy, to begin with. And also, what the hell are dark elves, and are they, and that he was very into Tolkien, and I wasn't even sure, my experience with Tolkien being essentially the movies, like dark elves. No, I think they were from the Thor movies, not the Lord of the Rings movies. Well, okay. So for people who have actually read this stuff, and remember it, there are dark elves. They are part of the lore, as it turns out. So I got, 2 emails that mentioned it. One from Jeremy Freiberger saying this about it, saying regarding the topic involving dark elves, it made me wonder if today's 50, 60-something tech bros and billionaire weirdos were once teenage Dungeons and Dragons aficionados. And they probably were. That's good observation. And he says when he was in high school, graduating in the 80s, the D&D guys were often also the early computer science types. And that's largely true. That's a good overlap and a good point there. I wasn't hugely into Dungeons and Dragons, but I knew what it was, and I had played it once or twice and thought, okay, well, that seems like fun, but an awful lot of trouble to get your game going. So not really where I was going to spend my time, but I get the appeal of it. And I wasn't an early computer science person, but an early computer communications adopter there, and was online from well into the early 80s. So it wasn't computer science per se. I wasn't going to become a computer science major or begin computer engineering, but, making use of the things in a time when most people just didn't either had them at home for games or I guess finance or whatever, but weren't doing online communication with them. So, okay. So that's a possibility. Now more, or deeper into the subject, I got an email from another listener, who we'll call Paul M for the moment because I didn't seek permission ahead of time. I should have about identification. But Paul, if you don't mind, I'd be happy to identify you more fully, but perhaps not. But Paul says that, this is interesting. He was sure that numerous others would have informed us that, ready for this, am I trying to read the names of Tolkien characters about whom I know nothing? But actually Paul was the only one. There are probably numerous others who you're probably right, who have this knowledge and who have said, I don't either, I don't want to take the time, or I'm sure many other people have informed me. But Paul, you were the first to inform me that Eol, E-O-L, maybe, was a dark elf in Tolkien's Silmarillion opus. Okay. I believe you. I'm just not a Tolkien fan, but I like the movies. They were fun. It's a good story. And who was this dark elf? Well, I can tell you about some of his accomplishments. Thanks to Paul's reporting here, he forged Gurthang, maybe Gurthang, a sword made of metal from a meteor, which is actually a thing that you can do and is very interesting. And by the way, in case you were ever wondering where Tim Lang, known on Daily Kos as Meteor Blades, got that from, not from the stories, although he may be a fan of the stories as well, but from actually in real life forging knife blades, dagger blades from meteor metals. Well, anyway, Turin, it says here, used this weapon to slay Glaurung. How unfortunate for Glaurung, but perhaps necessary for the story. I know nothing about it. Glaurung, a dragon, in fact, and so slaying dragons is necessary for these stories. We're sure about that. And then, sadly, take his own life with it. There is a great deal of darkness in Tolkien's writings, elves notwithstanding, and then some observations about the general human condition in which we all hold some amount of darkness that we are supposed to learn to control to some extent, but some of us, including presidential candidates, have never actually been able to fully contain. I added the part about presidential candidates, but I'm sure Paul would likely agree. So there you go. Dark elf updates. Where else are you going to get that? No other news podcast spends so much time on the dark elf situation in America. But there you go. It's out there. Why is it out there? Now I will go back and say, I went and looked for another profile of Curtis Yarvin because it was important, I think, for you to figure out how weird, or to hear how weird this guy actually is. Remember that we were originally pointed to a piece from The Information, I think was the name of the publication, and they were behind such an onerous paywall that we were simply unable to share that information for anything less than $700 a year. and we went another direction. This time, I bring you one from Vox, which you can get without onerous terms. Curtis Yarvin wants American democracy toppled, and that seems very much in line with what was being reported in the information. He has some prominent Republican fans. Now, this one produced not in the wake of J.D. Vance's ascension to vice presidential candidate, but prior to it, October of 2022. So this has been known for some time and was something that I guess we were all meant to know before J.D. Vance's ascension to the vice presidential nomination, so that we could say, yeah, he is weird, even if we never heard the couch story. Who are we talking about? Curtis Yarvin, the new right blogger, has been cited by Blake Masters, who we were aware was a weirdo, and J.D. Vance, who some of us are only just now coming to understand as a weirdo. But there you go. That's a pairing for you. What exactly is this wackadoodle advocating, one might ask? They didn't use wackadoodle in the subheader here, but I will. Andrew Prokop, above that station, of course, in writing this for Vox back in 2022. In September of 2021, or 2021, as many of us would say, J.D. Vance, a GOP, or GOP candidate, as he would say, a GOP candidate for Senate in Ohio, appeared on a conservative podcast. You don't say. This is the problem with the guy, as he appears on nothing but conservative podcasts and is therefore encouraged to say the dumbest and weirdest possible things. So he's on a conservative podcast to discuss what is to be done with the United States. That's the usual podcast fare for non-weirdos, right? Will you come on my podcast? We want to talk about what is to be done with the United States, as opposed to, hey, let's talk about the news or sports or anything like that. Great. Okay. Well, no doubt his proposals were dramatic. He urged Donald Trump, should he win another term, to, quote, seize the institutions of the left, unquote. Standard fare for kitchen table talk. Fire every single mid-level bureaucrat in the U.S. government. Replace them with our people. So by September of 2021, J.D. Vance already considered Trump's people our people. And defy the Supreme Court if it tries to stop him, which of course it wouldn't. To the uninitiated, all that might seem stunning. But Vance acknowledged that he had an intellectual inspiration. What was it? So there's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who has written about some of these things, which is interesting because, you should generally be looking over your shoulder, worried about who's going to be sneaking up on you if you're writing such things. But he, J.D. Vance, says he's been reading it and he's a candidate for Senate in Ohio and he wants to run on this basis, I guess. That's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who has written about some of these things. Now, nearly a decade earlier, it says, a Stanford law student named Blake Masters, who emerged as one of the weirdest candidates the Republicans had in the 2020s, right? Blake Masters, asked by a friend for reading recommendations for a book club, emailed a link to a series of blog posts. So already you failed the assignment. Give me some reading recommendations for a book club. How about no books, but blogs instead? Well, if it's a reading club, fine, but it's a book club, so no. These posts, though, that he thought was so important, I'm going to ignore the fact that you're a book club and I'm going to send you blog posts. What was he so excited about recommending that other people read? Posts that made an argument that was quite unusual in the American context. Like he's already basically un-American as a law student, asserting that the democratically elected U.S. government should be abolished and replaced with a monarchy. Its author, then writing pseudonymously, was Yarvin. But again, just for a moment, think about how unusual this is, and think about this as well. Now that we're done, I guess, having investigations into, well, probably not because Republicans for the moment still control the House. now that we should be done having hearings, investigations into anti-Semitism on campus and what the leadership of our elite universities is doing about it, can we get some accounting? What about an investigation as to why the weirdest, most anti-American, anti-democratic minds of the Republican Party are graduating with degrees from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, etc., Princeton, if you count Ted Cruz. And how is this happening? What's going on in the political science departments that we're graduating people who are supposedly, count as the intelligentsia of the Republican Party, who say openly things like, yeah, democracy, not really very good. We should do the monarchy thing. Like in terms of, your basic education, Republicans say that they want to have an American heritage education that will teach kids, of course, the value of American ideals and the founding documents, all of which, of course, are anti-monarchical in their nature. And yet they're graduating people who say, yeah, we should get rid of American democracy and install a monarchy. Like, not only should you not be running for office in a republic with ideas like that, but you should be looking back and saying, I don't know that you grasp the material. It's one thing to come out and say, you have this dumb idea that we should revert to monarchy, but I think you've failed to grasp the nature of the materials that I was teaching in this political science class or this constitutional law class, and I'm changing your grade to an F. It's okay that you have this opinion, but you're not going to pass my class with it. Anyway, you can have it, but you can't express it in my question to you about, tell me about what the Constitution says and means. If you come out of there saying we're better off with a monarchy, I don't know. I don't know how well we did with you. But I would like an investigation into what's happening here. Why is it that Republicans who graduate from these elite institutions don't seem to be leaving with any common belief in the value of American freedoms? That's concerning to me. Anyway, so more about the weirdo Yarvin. Masters, of course, is now, at the time of this writing, the GOP Senate nominee in Arizona. So it's odd that two people who are Ivy League graduates were running in the same year, having been nominated for Senate, the United States Senate, by the Republican Party, are both, readers and followers of wackadoodle Yarvin, who's telling them, yeah, what we need is a monarchy. And not Stanford law training hasn't taught this guy to see through this. Not Yale law training has taught this other guy to see through this. It's astonishing that they can't see through this guy's reasoning and find their way to landing on, monarchy is bad and a republic is probably better. That's some weak work on behalf of Stanford and Yale. It's a damning indictment, if you ask me. Anyway, so there we are. Masters is now the GOP Senate nominee in Arizona. At a campaign event last year, according to Vanity Fair's James Pogue, he was asked how he'd actually drain the swamp in Washington. Give us some specifics, I guess. And his answer was, one of my friends has this acronym he calls RAGE. I would not go with that. I would not lead with that. And I would come up with something different. Retire all government employees. That's RAGE. Masters answered, you've probably guessed who the friend is. And it's Yarvin, but we've talked so much about so many other people that I have to remind you. It's, there you go. So what do you like that? How are you going to drain the swamp? Retire all government employees. Well, that is draining the swamp. How are you going to do that, though? Based on the fact that, there's laws protecting them and you've been to Stanford Law School and the idea of your being able to wave that diploma around is that it's supposed to be understood that you will have a common understanding and a common agreement with the rest of society that laws are binding and precedent is meaningful and that the American experiment is worth saving and that monarchy is not the right direction. But I guess you don't have that. In many thousand words worth of blog posts over the past 15 years, now more, computer programmer, there's your theory, and tech startup founder Curtis Yarvin has laid out a critique of American democracy, arguing that it's liberals and elite academic institutions, media outlets, and the permanent bureaucracy who hold true power in this declining country, while the U.S. executive branch has become weak, incompetent, and captured. And so therefore, for some reason, conservatives in elite academic institutions have drawn the conclusion that monarchy is the better way to not have a ossified executive branch. That seems weird. But he stands out among right-wing commentators for being probably the single person who spent the most time gaming out how, exactly, the U.S. government could be toppled and replaced, rebooted or reset, as he likes to say, because he's a tech guy, with a monarch or a CEO or a dictator at the helm. Yarvin argues that a creative and visionary leader, a startup guy, like he says Napoleon or Lenin was, startup guy, should seize absolute power, dismantle the old regime, and build something new in its place. Sure, why not? He's the guy who spent the most time gaming that out, but that's because no one stopped him and told him, oh, actually, most of the country not at all interested in that, and it's anathema to our founding principles. To Yarvin, incremental reforms and half measures are necessarily doomed. The only way to achieve what he wants, and who cares, is to assume absolute power, and the game is all about getting to a place where you can pull that off. Critics have called his ideas fascist, a term he disputes. So there you go. Fact check. He says he's not a fascist. So there you go. Arguing that centralizing power under one ruler long predates fascism. That's essentially like saying, we're not a democracy. We're a republic. Well, that's fascist. Oh, no, it isn't. This idea is even older than fascism. All right. Well, okay. So it sucks worse than fascism plus is old. Great. That's a good argument. And that his ideal monarch should rule for all rather than fomenting a class war as fascists do. Well, he should, but it's difficult to get him to do that. Autocratic fits as a descriptor, although his preferred term is monarchist, which, again, monarchist is classist. I mean, to the extent that it's a hereditary monarchy. And there are other models of monarchy, I guess, but none that have really lasted a great deal of time or succeeded anyway. But okay. Anyway, whatever. We shouldn't get hung up in this dumb stuff. You won't find many on the right saying they wholly support Yarvin's program, especially the monarchy thing. But his critique of the status quo and some of his ideas for changing it have influenced several increasingly prominent figures. And they really shouldn't, because at their heart, they're super dumb. Besides Vance and Masters, if monarchy is the heart of it, then it's super dumb. Besides Vance and Masters, whose campaigns declined to comment for this story back in 2021, Yarvin has had a decade-long association with, you'll never guess which billionaire. Not Donald Trump. He's not really a billionaire. Peter Thiel, who is similarly disillusioned with democracy and American government. You feel for them, don't you? You can see why he's so disillusioned. He's an idiot sitting on $1 billion. Maybe he's not an idiot. I don't know. But I'd be so disillusioned if I had just billions of dollars from working within the American system. I'm so sad about these billions of dollars that I have and the political system I'm able to exert so much control over. Okay. Thiel, I guess, wrote in 2009, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. That's 2009. So it's coming up on, 15 years that he's just been sitting on this pile of money doing whatever he wants. It's really bad for him, Earlier this year, 2021, he declared that Republican members of Congress who voted for Trump's impeachment after January 6th attacks were traitorous. So what? Fox host Tucker Carlson is another fan of Yarvin's, in case you were looking to make him look any worse, interviewing Yarvin with some fascination for his streaming program last year, but then also diverting some time to how to tan your testicles for better health. So, if you're thinking that he was onto something, you're wrong. He's even influenced online discourse. Yarvin was the first to popularize the analogy from the Matrix. This is where this idiot comes from. This idea of being red-pilled or, anything pilled, suddenly losing your illusions and seeing the supposed reality of the world more clearly as applied to politics. So, to the extent you're sick of people saying that they've been something pilled, you can blame Curtis Yarvin for it. All right. I mean, you could dine out on that, but instead he's decided to go all the way and be a monarchist. Overall, Yarvin is arguably the leading intellectual figure, really, on the new right, a movement of thinkers. Please, why do you do this? And activists critical of the traditional Republican establishment who argue that an elite left ruling class has captured and is ruining America. Boo-hoo. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. Let's continue with this Vox explainer of who is Curtis Yarvin and why is he such a weirdo. I don't know if they explain why he's such a weirdo, actually, but we'll just lay out that he is such a weirdo. And, it's not news, certainly, but I guess the more Republicans try to dodge and weave and disassociate themselves from the thinkers, if you call them that, who have put together their game plan, the more important it is, I think, to figure out just who they are. And I don't know if they ever need to be rounded up or anything. You might as well have a list, right? That's very fascistic, of course. But as you know, you can just wave that away and say, well, it predates fascism, so it doesn't really even matter, and you can't hang that on me. All right, we'll borrow some of their thinking. We'll let them influence us and call people coconut-pilled and say that these guys deserve to be rounded up, but not in a fascistic manner, a proto-fascistic manner instead. All right, where were we? Yes, right. He was among the leading supposedly intellectual figures on the new right, complaining about how America was being destroyed while they were amassing multi-billion-dollar fortunes. Yes, very sad. But not only are they are the leftists from the elite class, not like Stanford Law or Yale Law or anything like that, capturing and ruining America, but that drastic measures are necessary to fight back against them. And new right ideas are getting more influential among Republican staffers and politicians. Trump's advisors are already brainstorming Yarvinite, ready, or at least Yarvin-light, ideas for a second term, such as firing thousands of federal civil servants and replacing them with Trump loyalists, which feels like not a very new idea at all, for one thing, but you should, the reason why some of this is important and relevant right now, not just to let you know who Curtis Yarvin is in case his name starts coming up more often, but as they dodge and weave and try to deny responsibility for or ties to Project 2025, where have you heard about the idea of in the second term, firing thousands of federal civil servants and replacing them with Trump loyalists. Well, in a number of places, not least of which is Project 2025. Of course, we heard about it, this plan, that particular part of the plan, before we ever heard of Project 2025. It was Schedule F, and an executive order initially actually issued by the first Trump administration, repealed right away by the Biden administration, but because it's an executive order, he could just, put it back in place again. But I guess to the extent that you think that there's perhaps some real truth-telling, fact-checking value to saying that Trump has nothing to do with or never heard of or has no connection with or no support, offers no support for Project 2025, one of the major tenets of Project 2025 is this Schedule F idea of firing all of the mid-level bureaucrats in the federal government and starting over with Trump loyalists. And he has already tried to do that. He already, issued the Schedule F executive order, though he never really got around to executing it. So, if that's a major part of Project 2025, and he's also saying, I don't know anything about that. That's not me. I don't support that. But you already did one of the biggest components. You already laid the groundwork in one of your own executive orders. You signed it. No, I didn't. So I don't know how he gets out from underneath that, but logic doesn't have anything to do with this. But for us, we like logic, so telling the story is important. So, by the way, I wanted to take a look at it. They linked the passage in here saying that he had Yarvinite, or at least Yarvin-like ideas for a second term. This is something that comes from Axios. Also back in the day, Jonathan Swan's Axios piece from July of 2022, a radical plan for Trump's second term. It's very interesting because, again, this predates the announcement of Project 2025. Why are there no fact checks saying Jonathan Swan is a liar? This isn't radical plan for Trump's second term. This is just some weirdos. Trump hasn't actually said, I really like this weirdo's ideas. I'm going to make them my own. He hasn't said so. It's just interesting. And of course, it revolves around Schedule F, this reporting. But I don't know. This is a major component of Project 2025, and I don't know why they keep pretending that they haven't already reported this and know it to be true. Anyway, to continue on with the Vox explainer here, with hundreds of election deniers on the ballot this year, that would be 2022, another disputed presidential election could happen soon, and Yarvin has, you'll never believe it, written a playbook for the power grab he hopes will then unfold. It's a piece he wrote back in April of 2022 in his wackadoodle Substack newsletter Gray Mirror, because he's so deep and spooky and stuff. Gray Mirror, not Black Mirror, Gray Mirror, the butterfly revolution. What is it all about? Oh, who even cares? The guy's a monarchist. But, it might make some sense one day to read through it and get some sense in his own words of, how weird and creepy he actually is. Can you believe that the weird, creepy guys that you all now recognize as weird and creepy, like J.D. Vance and Blake Masters, are weird and creepy because they really enjoy the political, theoretical musings of a weird and creepy guy who wants everybody to know that he's really a dark elf and you all are a bunch of hobbits? That'll get you some dates. All right. Well, anyway, he's written a playbook. I can't believe it. But of course, he has nothing to do with it and he can disavow it later. So these ideas are no longer entirely just abstract musings. It's unclear how many powerful people may take Yarvin entirely literally, but many do take him seriously. If you're still using that differentiation with Trump, take him not literally, but seriously. And after the 2020 election crisis, the fall of American democracy seems rather more plausible than it used to. To better understand the ideas influencing a growing number of conservative elites now and the battles that may lie ahead, then I reviewed much of Yarvin's sizable body of work, and I interviewed him. Yuck. During our lengthy conversation, Yarvin argued that the eventual fall of U.S. democracy could be fundamentally joyous and peaceful. So joy, it is a strategy. Yet the steps President Trump took in that direction after the 2020 election were not particularly joyous or peaceful, and it was hard for me to see why further movement down that road would be. Well, first up, from obscure anti-democracy blogger to new right influencer. And again, I don't know where the money to run this thing comes from. Maybe it's his own money from being a tech bro or whatever, but it drives me up the wall that there's like institutional support for this wackadoodle's brain farts and no institutional support for left-leaning infrastructure and communications and content production. Although, I guess better support for it lately in the convention context anyway, at least in terms of giving people access. So that's nice. In Yarvin's telling his political awakening, let's hear more about that, occurred during the 2004 election. A computer programmer living in Silicon Valley, he was then an avid reader of political blogs following the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth scandal about whether Democratic nominee John Kerry had lied about aspects of his military service. Yarvin thought it was clear Kerry had lied and felt the media went to stunning lengths to protect him and smear his accusers, whereas the rest of us felt the opposite. But he also became disillusioned with the conservative response, which he thought amounted to ineffectively complaining about media bias and continuing with politics as usual. The problem, he felt, was far deeper. Yes, overthrow the United States government. There you go. And that's a normal person's response. I think John Kerry might have lied about some aspect of his military service. To hell with the Republic. All right. Not too weird, Dark Elf. An intense period of reading old books on political theory and history to contemplate how systems work followed. Great. Eventually, he, as he later put it, stopped believing in democracy. That's a quote. Comparing this realization to how formerly religious people feel when they stop believing in God. Also make you popular. Soon he began posting blog comments and then writing a self-described anti-democracy blog beginning in 2007 under the pseudonym, because he's not weird, Mencius Moldbug. Now, writing under pseudonyms can be weird. I have, and it was, but there are some handles, like if you say, Cuddly Poodle, that's a different kind of handle than Mencius Moldbug. But okay, there's some description, I think, in the other piece about why he chose Mencius Moldbug. Maybe there's something in here. In these writings, discursive, filled with historical references, yay, Roman Empire, wry and often gleefully offensive, where have we seen that before? He laid out a sort of grand theory of why America is broken and how it can be fixed. And here they are in bullet point form. The U.S. government is a sclerotic, decaying institution that can no longer achieve great or even competent things, like, coming up with a vaccine in record time, turning the economy around, quadrupling investment in green infrastructure, etc. Nothing like that. Getting us out of economic freefall, the worst one since the Great Depression. Anyway. Can no longer achieve great or even competent things, and as he now puts it, just sucks. That's good old-fashioned political science for you. Constrained by the separation of powers in Congress, the president has negligible power to achieve his agenda in contrast to the deep state bureaucracy and the nonprofits that are permanent fixtures of Washington's governing class. True power in the U.S. is held by the cathedral. The cathedral, right? Everyone knows the cathedral. You don't? Oh, maybe it's his own term of art, but clearly that would evoke something in particular for you, right? The cathedral. No? Rings no bells? Well, in his view, that is the elite academic and media institution that, in Yarvin's telling, set the bounds of acceptable political discourse and distort reality to fit their preferred ideological frames. Like Yale and Harvard and Stanford that are graduating these guys. This does not unfold as a centralized conspiracy, but rather through a shared worldview and culture. You can't have that. And it's his explanation for why society keeps moving to the left through the decades. Shared worldview and culture. We have to stop that and give you the one I came up with from reading fantasy novels and old political science books. It's not just the current government that sucks. Democracy sucks, too. Sometimes he denounces democracy entirely, calling it a dangerous, malignant form of government. Sometimes he says democracy doesn't even practically exist in the U.S. because voters don't have true power over the government as compared to those other interests which function as an oligarchy. Sometimes he argues that organizations in which leadership is shared or divided simply aren't effective. So, somebody's just going to have to be the leader, and it's weird that it's him. Far preferable, in his view, would be a government run like most corporations. Oh, how have we done with that theory over the past 30, 40 years? We should be running government like a business. Yeah, businesses need bailouts. And where do they get them? Generally from the government. But okay, that one has not worked out very well. But they should be run like most corporations, with one leader holding absolute power over those below, which is not actually the way corporations run. Though perhaps accountable to a board of directors of sorts, he admits that an unaccountable autocracy is a real problem. Oh, thank you. This monarch/CEO would have the ability to actually run things, unbothered by pesky civil servants, judges, voters, the public, or the separation of powers. How do we achieve effective management? We know one simple way: find the right person and put him or her in charge, he writes, like the guy who wants to run Starbucks from Newport Beach, California and commute to Seattle every day by private jet. The right person. For years, Yarvin, or a guy who launches a car into space because he owns both a car company and a space company, and so why the hell not? For years, Yarvin was something of an odd internet curiosity. With his ideas far from most political conservatives' radar, he gained one prominent reader, Thiel, who had written about his own disillusionment with democracy, then became a Yarvin friend, funded his startup, and I guess it went from there. So to the extent that Yarvin says, well, I don't draw institutional support for my work. I have my own money. I had a successful startup. He found a billionaire who was equally disillusioned with something, and he read your blog and said, here's $1 billion for your startup. Like, that doesn't happen very often on the other side. I'll say that. He's fully enlightened, Yarvin wrote later of Thiel in an email. Guess what? You just bought full enlightenment by giving me your money. Okay. Let's see. Just plays it very carefully. He's fully enlightened. He just plays it very carefully. Thiel did not respond to a request for comment for this article. Beyond that, ideas bloggers like Robin Hansen and Scott Alexander, whoever they are, argued with him, and he gradually got more attention for being a leading figure in the neo-reactionary movement. You don't want to be in any kind of reactionary movement, but okay. Though his blog was pseudonymous, he had not made a particularly extensive effort to keep his identity secret, appearing in person as Moldbug to give a talk at a conference in 2012. In the following years, journalists began to write about him by name, and though he soon put his blog on hiatus to focus on his startup, outrage over some of his writings continued to follow him. Yarvin was disinvited from one tech conference in 2015 after protests, and his appearance at another in 2016 led several sponsors and speakers to withdraw. Popular. The sticking points commonly cited by his critics included one Moldbug post on historical thought about slavery. Yes, just dive right in. Good. Which was seized on as proof that he was pro-slavery and racist. In a response, he said he believes in the biological roots of intelligence and does not believe that all populations or racial groups are equally intelligent on average, but he insisted racism was despicable and said he did not believe Europeans have any inherent or moral superiority over other races. Another post that spurred outrage discussed far-right Norwegian mass murderer Anders Breivik. Remember him? Yarvin argued that the political organizations of left heroes like Che Guevara and Nelson Mandela also murdered civilians, and they should face condemnation too. And when they did murder people, they did. I mean, I don't know what the complaint is, but Yarvin was out of the blogging game for the early Trump years, though he did attend Thiel's watch party for the 2016 election, but in his time away, his influence grew. To some on the right, Yarvin's longtime obsessions seemed both prescient and clarifying. Yikes. The Cathedral anticipated the great, it says awakening. I don't know whether they meant great awakening or they mean woke, like, great awakening. And I think it appears so, given that it reads, anticipated the great awakening and the social justice wars, as Jacob Siegel has written. Presidential powerlessness before the deep state predicted Trump's struggles in getting his agenda done. It was an illegal agenda. Additionally, Trump himself proved a filter of sorts to the conservative intellectual class. As the president disdained the norms of classically liberal democracy, conservatives who were attached to those norms either self-selected out of the party or got purged. The pro-Trump intellectual space was taken by the new right. Thinkers arguing the left's control of culture, society, and government had gotten so bad that extreme measures were necessary to reverse it, and that previous GOP leaders were too hesitant to fully recognize they're in a war and need to fight back. Take, for instance, Vance. He's relevant, right? In explaining to podcast host Jack Murphy why he became a Trump supporter after initially disdaining him. Good question. Vance said, I saw and realized something about the American elite, not me, the American elite, and about my role in the American elite. Oh, okay. And that took me just a while to figure out. I was red-pilled. Using the reference Yarvin helped popularize. We are in a late Republican period, Vance told Murphy. If we are going to push back against it, we're going to have to get pretty wild and pretty far out there and go in directions that a lot of conservatives right now are uncomfortable with. That is a non-answer. Why do you support Trump? Because I thought about my role in the elite and I was red-pilled, and we're in a late Republican period. And if we're going to push back against it, against what? The movement to fascism or the movement back to republicanism? I'm not sure which, but something, we're going to have to get wild and crazy, and some people are going to be uncomfortable. No answer. After Yarvin stepped away from his startup, the company behind the open source software project Urbit, URBIT, which you've all heard about because it's super popular and successful. In 2019, when he stepped away, the American Mind, oh boy, the online publication of the conservative think tank Claremont Institute. Anybody heard about them and what they've been up to in terms of overthrowing the U.S. government? Major contributor to Project 2025. Major contributor to the insurrection of 2021, January 6th, the home base of, why did I just blank on his name? But the supposed intellectual underpinnings of the January 6th, coup, Eastbrook, right? Is it Eastbrook or Eastman? I can't even remember now. Dang. All right. Well, I wonder, that's one of those weird things that as soon as you start to say, oh, I need to call him out by name, and then you go, hold on a second. What's the name? It's John. Why did I say I'm saying Eastbrook. I'm thinking of Easterbrook, Frank Easterbrook, the federal judge who has nothing to do with this, conservative as he was. But John Eastman, sorry, and Ken Cheeseborough as well, who he roped into this. But John Eastman works out of the Claremont Institute, in case you were wondering. And anyway, so he stepped away from his startup, and in 2019, the American Mind started publishing his essays. Claremont began publishing his essays, effectively welcoming him into the now mainstream discourse on the right. He became a frequent guest on New Right podcasts. In 2020, he started a Substack, at first using it to post excerpts from an in-progress book, but eventually returning to his blogging roots. And then when Trump tried and failed to overturn the year's election results, Yarvin's longtime interest in regime change suddenly became far more relevant. Okay. Now up, how to win absolute power in Washington. Talk of an American coup may sound bizarre, but coups are not that weird. They happen in other countries, and in Yarvin's telling, they've even happened in the U.S., sort of. He argues that Alexander Hamilton, Abraham Lincoln, and Franklin Roosevelt each so sweepingly expanded presidential power, centralizing authority and establishing new departments that they can be said to have founded new regimes. Meh. But Yarvin wants to see something even more dramatic. In posts such as Reflections on the Late Election, the late election, m'lady, great, terrific, and The Butterfly Revolution, earlier linked, and podcast appearances such as those with former Trump official Michael Anton and writer Brian Chow, learning some new names here, Yarvin has laid out many specific ideas about how the system could really be fully toppled and replaced with something like a centralized monarchy. Sometimes he frames this as what Trump should have done in 2020. Okay, but I frame it as they should have gotten rid of him on January 7th at dawn. But hey, I'm a radical, what can I tell you? But what he should but won't do in 2024, or what some other candidates should do in the future if they want to seize power. Well, they should kill all their enemies, that's how. Trump will never do anything like this, Yarvin wrote. But I won't disguise my belief that someone should, someone worthy of the task, of course. That's a great answer. Someone should do some stuff, but they should be worthy, of course. Good answer. The end. That's all I need to write. It's basically a set of thought experiments about how to dismantle U.S. democracy and its current system of government. Writer John Gans, reviewing some of Yarvin's proposals, concluded, if that's not the product of a fascist imagination, I don't know what possibly could be. Well, technically, it's not fascist because, oh boy. Many of these are similar to events preceding the fall of democracies elsewhere in the world. Again, Yarvin's prominent fans like Vance and Masters wouldn't fully endorse this program. Masters told NBC that he would have a different prescription of what to do than Yarvin, and that he believes in the Constitution. So that's nice. But some aspects of it have caught their interest. Overthrowing the government, but only a little bit. Campaign on it and win. That's next up here. First off, the would-be dictator should seek a mandate from the people by running for president and openly campaigning on the platform of, as he put it to Chow, if I'm elected, I'm going to assume absolute power in Washington and rebuild the government. No. The idea here would be not to frame this as destroying the American system, but rather as improving a broken system so that so many are frustrated with. Congress is unpopular, the courts are unpopular, the federal government is unpopular. Why not just promise to govern as president as you see fit without their interference and see if people like that idea? Well, who would care if they do, right? I'm a fascist. You're not that far from a world in which you can have a candidate in 2024 even, maybe. Make that pledge, Yarvin continued. I think you could get away with it. That's sort of what people already thought was happening with Trump. He said, well, that's true. To do it for real does not make them much more hysterical. And he laughed because this is so funny. It's actually much more effective. It no longer seems clear that voters would reject such a pitch, by the way. That's a good point. Trump's ascendancy already proves that many American voters are no longer so enamored of niceties about the rule of law and civics class pieties about the greatness of the American separated powers system. Political messaging about threats to democracy has polled poorly this year. That was 2 years ago, with voters not particularly engaged by it. But the weirdo thing is working, and it's going to work on Yarvin too. Another piece of advice Yarvin has in this vein is that the would-be dictator should try to prevent blue America from feeling so terrified about the new regime that they take to the streets and make it all fall apart. Instead, ideally, liberals and leftists should feel so disillusioned with the status quo that they're ready for something new, like dictatorship. He thought things were on a promising trajectory on this front during the early Biden administration, but has griped that the Dobbs decision may have scuttled this by firing up blue America. They actually realized they wanted something. Oh no, can't have that. Purge the federal bureaucracy and create a new one. That's the next big idea. Once the new president / would-be monarch is elected, Yarvin thinks the time is of the essence. The speed that this happens with has to take everyone's breath away, he told Chow. It should just execute at a rate that totally baffles its enemies. Shock and awe. Yarvin says the transition period before the inauguration should be used to intensively study what's essential for the federal government to do, determine a structure for the new government, and hire many of its future employees. And then, once in power, it's time to retire all government employees of the old regime, sending them off with nice pensions, I bet they won't do that, so they won't make too much of a fuss. To circumvent Congress, the president should have his appointees take over the Federal Reserve and direct the Fed on how to fund the new regime. Okay, that sounds like it's going to be tremendous fun. Talk of firing vast swaths of federal workers is now common on the right. In late 2020, Trump issued that executive order called Schedule F that would reclassify as many as 50,000 civil servants in middle management as political appointees who could be fired and replaced by the new president. Not that he really has a list for actually replacing them. He just would leave a lot of those things vacant. Nothing came of it. Biden quickly revoked it, but Trump's regime in exile, I'm way late on this, is brainstorming what could be done with it in a second term, as Axios's Jonathan Swan has reported. What's that a link to? Is that the same? Yeah, inside Trump's plan for a second term. Basically, though, their early on detection that something that turned out to be named Project 2025 was taking shape. To Yarvin, even that is a doomed half measure. You should be executing executive power from day one in a totally emergency fashion, he told Anton. You don't want to take control of these agencies through appointments. You want to defund them. You want them to totally cease to exist. This would, of course, involve some amount of chaos, but Yarvin hopes that will be brief, and the actual essential work of government would quickly be taken over by newly created bodies that could be under the autocrats' control. You know, like the Coalition Provisional Authority, with pallets of shrink-wrapped $100 bills disappearing. And who wouldn't trust Donald Trump and his cohorts with pallets of shrink-wrapped $100 bills? Sounds like it's going to work out just great. Look, Yarvin has a fantasy, and he's enjoying getting attention for indulging it, but it doesn't have any basis in real political science. He read some dusty old books and thinks that it does, but I'm not certain that I'm convinced by it. How about you? Well, it doesn't matter. It's too late, and now he's basically running for vice president.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, as you can imagine, there's a lot more of this idiot to be unearthed, but it's time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and it's time to welcome him back to having the show all ready to go and the system rebooted. So congratulations on that one. I know we had some trouble on Friday, so you're probably hungry for it. Stay tuned.